three-man booth, NFL Week 17. Dan, Salem, Phil, and Bud. It's 2 weeks left of this long season. We want to first have a few thoughts on John Madden. I don't know, he passed away. Man, that guy, I don't know, personally, he inspired my love of football.
I just like his video games. Was he a coach?
He coached the Raiders.
I'm obviously just kidding. I know he was a coach. I know he would coach the Raiders. The big thing for me was always watching football at my grandma's house on Fox. And he was on there with Pat Summerall with the turducken and the turkey with the 6 legs and stuff like that. So
right, they'd stuff the birds inside each other.
Oh, Lori reminds me. He was also in Little Giants.
The annexation of Puerto Rico.
The annexation of Puerto Rico, exactly.
I had this Monday Night Football game on Super Nintendo, and he would do the calls in the game, like before his football game. It was the worst. It was a bad football game, but he made it.
I think I remember playing that in your basement sometimes.
Yeah, you just had a button mash to try to run for a touchdown.
That and Oregon Trail, but we'll digress.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, we're doing really well with our picks. Even after Bud didn't do well last week, the Jaguars screwed him, but he's still really well in the season. Phil, why don't you kick us off? We got our records to uphold here with 2 weeks to go.
I'll tell you what. I don't know if I've seen a worse offense than the Giants have been putting up the last 6 or 7 weeks. It is beyond awful. I know Bud always sits here and says the Jets are bad and the offense sucks. The Giants are worse.
Yes, they are.
Glennon, they're worse with Fromm. It's literally unwatchable. So give me the Bears -6. That's just, I mean, that feels like the lock of all locks. They can't generate points. Speaking of awful to watch, that Washington football team last week just didn't even show up. Are you kidding me? Dallas scores 49 points in the first half. Unbelievable. Give me.
Phil, it screwed me in fantasy. I think they screwed you too, right?
Well, they screwed me because of Amari Cooper. They just throw the ball up to him every time, and he catches all these passes. Then he catches that last touchdown right before the half, and that pretty much put me to bed. I was so pissed after that touchdown. I turned the game off and went to bed. Give me the Eagles 3.5 over Washington. That's my other lock of the century.
All right, Bud, who do you got for this week?
I am taking the Packers over the Vikings. Packers obviously have a lot to play for. They hold the number 1 seed right now. They can't get off the gas. Vikings are an up and down team. And then I'm going to keep riding the train. I'm picking against the Jets. The Jets should have lost to Jacksonville if Trevor Lawrence just continued to run on that last play, because he could have totally scored a touchdown there. We'll get into it. And the Jets are playing the Bucs, and the Bucs are, I mean, they could win the Super Bowl again. And Tom Brady absolutely owns the Jets all the time.
I know the Bucs will be out without their head coach, but it's not going to matter.
Bruce Arians has got COVID.
That's what we're. And now
that's funny. Todd Bowles will be the coach.
Yeah, that'd be exciting.
Let's be honest. Brady's calling his own plays anyway, but just like Aaron Rodgers does. So.
Yep.
I don't know, man. I think Byron Leftwich has a lot to do with the play calling.
Big, very hot coaching candidate for Leftwich right now. All right, my 2 picks. I'm gonna go with the Cowboys, who, I mean, they steamrolled Washington, and they're playing an equally mediocre team right now in the Cardinals because they're just not playing well. They didn't play much defense last week. Their offense was up and down. Dallas has only given up like 4. They're gonna beat Arizona. They want to go strong into the playoffs. I don't think they're gonna go anywhere in the playoffs, but they're gonna go strong. They'll beat the Cardinals. And then I'm gonna take Kansas City, who just also humiliated Pittsburgh last weekend. It was like just absolutely embarrassing. And they get Cincinnati, who had a great game. Don't get me wrong, but their defense is not going to be able to slow down the Chiefs. And the Chiefs are only given 4.5. Again, that's an easy game. They can win by at least a touchdown. They get Kelsey back. I like these 2 championship-ready teams to win in Week 17.
All right. Can we talk about your Los Angeles Chargers for a second? Because you want to talk about embarrassing. Yeah, exactly. You and everybody else in LA had their head in their hands after that embarrassment performance.
Yeah, and I needed them for fantasy too.
That was terrible.
Well, there's some great memes going around about, hey, Philip Rivers is gone, but it's the same old Chargers. They seem to crap the bed every year at the end of the season.
I couldn't believe that Houston won, and more importantly, at that point, I was actually rooting even more against the Jets, because then the Jets would have jumped up to the number 2 spot in the draft.
Yeah, currently I actually have the draft order pulled up. It's Jacksonville, Detroit, Houston, the Jets, the Giants, the Jets, Carolina, and New York again.
I mean, they're going to get a top 5 pick. I'd be shocked if they did it. That Zach Wilson run for a touchdown was just awesome. Yeah, you got your head down. I mean, you said they should have lost. I don't disagree with you. I can't believe they let the Jacksonville come all the way back, but then I wasn't surprised, and I was expecting them to lose, and they didn't.
So I look at this game, and I was home and I was watching it with my dad, and my dad makes a great point. Like, the coaching was awful because they kept going for it on 4th down. The game, honestly, the game shouldn't have even been close. The Jets should have, on that last drive, the Jets should have been up by 10 points. I don't know what I feel like. I guess I'm happy that they won. I mean, but their last 2 games are brutal. They got to play Tampa and they got to play Buffalo. And the way that things are going right now, Tampa has something to play for and Buffalo has something to play for. These teams are not going to go.
So the Bills have shit the bed a couple of times this season. I don't see it happening again. It's likely the Jets end with just 4 wins. And that's one more than you predicted. So, I mean, I guess that's a victory. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I predicted them 3 wins. So
you were pretty
remember,
bad.
Dan, we laughed at them for that. I think Dan had them in the playoffs, if I remember correctly.
He had them as a wild card potential.
I will not be making that mistake next season.
He's always the optimist. I tell him every year he's too optimistic.
So none of us like Tua, yet somehow the Dolphins are terrible and have won 7 games in a row. They are not a good football team. But how did they beat the Saints like that? I don't even understand because shut down their defense.
Did you watch that game yesterday at all?
I was not able to watch it, unfortunately.
It was unwatchable. The Saints offense must have had 25 yards of offense by the half. It was that bad.
But what happened to Taysom Hill?
Taysom Hill has COVID.
Okay.
Taysom Hill and Simeon.
I think they had like 11 or 13 players on COVID, which brings up a very good point that the NFL is going to need to figure out here. The last thing the NFL is going to want is to go into the playoffs and one of these teams have an outbreak. What are you going to do?
Well, they're making these teams play. Like the Jets probably should have had their game delayed also. They were
100%. The Jets barely had any players too. I mean, you mean to tell me playoff time comes around and Patrick Mahomes gets COVID? What are they doing?
The only thing I can tell you, they cannot delay the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is locked in on its date. So if these players have COVID and can't play in the Super Bowl, they have COVID and can't play in the Super Bowl.
I mean, you see some of these games. I mean, they are unwatchable with the players that they're putting out there. So to Phil's point, and Ian Book plays yesterday because their 2 quarterbacks have COVID. I heard something on the radio today that there were like 4 or 5 players that Sean Payton met for the first time yesterday when they showed up to play.
Blake Bortles was the backup quarterback. He went from the airport right to the arena yesterday.
By the way, Blake Bortles has played on like 5 teams this year because he got called. I forgot what it was. Yeah. It was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. He got a phone call to play backup and he was on the golf course. He had to leave.
He feels wanted.
So your question about the Dolphins, ready? They beat the Saints. They beat the Panthers. They beat the Ravens. They beat the Giants.
They
beat the Pistons. And they beat the Jets.
The Jets twice.
Well, that's a terrible resume.
I mean, there's your 7-game winning streak right there. It's not that impressive.
No, that's a terrible winning streak. But I mean, it's still 7 in a row. They were 1-7. So
you're right.
Somehow they control their own destiny. They're going to make the playoffs and then hopefully get bounced because they're a bad team.
Every single one of his passes is 5 yards.
Okay. All right. You want to hear the Miami Dolphins receiving numbers? Gesicki, 3. Smythe, 3. Hollins, 1. Waddle, 10.
Yeah, everything goes to Waddle.
Everything goes to Waddle. Devontae Parker didn't even get a target yesterday.
I want to switch gears real quick, Phil, because the Giants came out this week and announced that Daniel Jones and Joe Judge would both be back for the season. And my alarm bells went off. Anytime a team says that players are definitely coming back, it means somebody's getting fired.
Has he really got – this is going to sound like a homer comment, but really gotten a fair evaluation with a shitty offensive line, no receiving core ever, whether it's due to injury or COVID or whatever. It's like, has he really gotten a fair evaluation of whether or not he can play in the league? I don't know. I don't think Joe Judge is the problem, to be quite honest with you. I don't.
We all kind of
he was dealt a shitty hand, and it is what it is right now.
We all kind of agreed he should come back. We also agreed that he might not be able to.
You know why? Here's a reason. I know this. I don't know this. I didn't hear this. There's no quarterbacks coming out in this. It's not like there's no surefire ones. But I'll tell you what. The second Russell Wilson says, I'll go to New York for 2 draft picks, Daniel Jones is out here.
Yeah, it was just an odd thing for the Giants to say when they're obviously going to be entering a rebuilding year.
But there are other teams in the league, Phil, that have really bad offensive lines. I mean, case in point, Miami's offensive line is terrible, and they've won 7 in a row. Now, granted, their opponents have been utter garbage, and you can't get a fair evaluation. I mean, you see how Mike Lennon is playing, and Fromm played a half, and they had to pull him.
They had to pull him.
I mean, I guess that's a legitimate excuse, but the excuse that the offensive line is bad. I mean, there are other teams in the league that their offensive lines are bad, and they're still winning football games.
Well, this one's worse.
I think it really comes down to you have no playmakers. Barkley is a shell of himself. Galladay, you spent all this money on. He's played 1 game this year. You have no Sterling Shepard. They are probably the worst team in football.
I don't agree. I don't disagree with that.
And they probably should keep their 2 first-round picks for that very reason.
They probably should. I mean, a 36-year-old quarterback is not going to solve the problem.
You brought up the Dolphins, and I kind of think Daniel Jones is better than Tua. So if they actually make some good picks and Daniel Jones is healthy, then maybe he could have a decent season.
I agree with you. I do think Daniel Jones is better than Tua, but the difference between both of those franchises is that Miami actually has a competent coach. I mean, that team could have very easily, cashed in their chips and called it a day when they were 1-7, but they didn't. And now they're 8-7, and they're in the playoffs because the coaches made adjustments. They made adjustments to how they often. Their defense has been one of the top defenses, if not the top defense in the league the last 7 weeks. Joe Judge always starts his press conference, oh, you got to give the other team credit. I mean, eventually you got to figure out how to work with the things that you have.
I also don't see how firing Gettleman's going to change anything, to be quite honest with you.
The primary job of a general manager is talent evaluation and drafting players that will be good NFL players.
But to Bud's point, when you're playing Chattanooga State and you're getting 35 sacks a week, I mean, everyone's going to look good.
Well, yeah, but it's his job to know who won't be good.